Welcome in, Bears fans, to the second episode of Wear and Tear Bears post-game show. I won't say always, it's only the second time I've done this, but as sometimes, Mason West, and join with me is Bill T. Zimmerman. T stands for Terrible Pass Protection. Bill, how are you doing today?
Better than the Bears' offensive line, Mason. That's for sure.
Oh man, that was tough. That was a tough watch.
Yeah.
So we're gonna dive right into this diagnostic study. This is where we're just gonna basically do our general overview of the game that we just saw, kind of our gut reactions. How did you feel watching that game?
Well, it was promising early on. I mean, it was tough seeing CJ Stroud dice apart the defense early, but that first drive, the first couple drives with Caleb Williams, you felt good. You felt like he had command of the offense. He was 7 for 7, I think, starting the game. So you felt good, but then as the game progressed and D'Amico Ryans made some adjustments and started dialing up more pressure, we saw an offensive line, Mason, struggle. And I know the offensive line wasn't great in week one. I know the offensive line has struggled the last couple of years, but for Bears fans who know, Mason, that offensive line felt like the 2019 Bears offensive line. And that was a bad offensive line unit. It shouldn't have been as bad as it was, and it underperformed. I remember that Raiders game in London. I think that was 2019. They couldn't get anything going. They couldn't protect. They couldn't run. They could do nothing. And that's what it felt to me. And this offensive line, if it doesn't get better, just at least a modicum better where it's below average, it is going to be a bad season for the offense.
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head there. I want to be able to diagnose and assess, Caleb Williams. I want to be able to diagnose and assess the run game as a whole, Shane Waldron, all these different layers and levels. But I feel like I can't do that because the offensive line just is in a position where it doesn't let you do that, right? It's so inept right now. The fact that you can't even run the ball with any degree of certainty, with any positivity, it handcuffs you what you can do, obviously, as an offense. I mean, you saw that even a little bit with the Texans when Joe Mixon ended up going out. It changed the dynamic of their offense. And even when he came back, he was a little hampered. So, having a successful run game and a successful offense is important to that. And then, of course, that goes to the protection, too. There were some throws that Caleb made that were not good. there was some deep passes, some of those intermediate passes that weren't what we wanted. But at the same time, again, I'm struggling to truly assess him because what is his lack of accuracy potentially, and what is him having to feeling like he doesn't have time to get the ball out? I just don't know.
Yeah, and that's the thing that you're talking about here is you're kind of talking about ghosts, and that's a big problem. You don't want to do that to a rookie quarterback. That's kind of the whole point here is Caleb's accuracy on intermediate and deep balls was bad last week, and it was bad again this week. Now, the short game, you really had to like a lot of promise with Caleb Williams there. He had command of the offense. He was setting players. He was changing plays. He was moving stuff around. And if he had just 3 seconds to execute the short game, the balls were getting out quick. They were accurate. They were getting the guys, and they were getting 6, 7, 8 yards and moving the ball down the field. But when the pressure gets so bad, Mason, then you have to wonder, when Caleb Williams is dropping back and making some of those errant deep balls, is it because he's expecting pressure? And if you don't trust your offensive line, we hear it from NFL experts all the time. If you can't trust your offensive line as a quarterback, you are not going to have enough confidence to execute the offense and make the plays you need to make.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the first quarter of that game where there was a little more consistency with what we saw from the Bears offense when, it was like 3-3 and you felt overall kind of good about where this game was going. I mean, you saw they were 2 for 3 on third down. You saw that they had, in terms of net passing yards, 45, which was only about 20 less than what the Texans had. But again, one of the biggest discrepancies was in the rushing. The Texans had 38 yards rushing and the Bears had -3. So initially, early on, like we talked about, there was positivity that could come from Caleb Williams. That really, at the end of the day, that's what this is all about: is who and what is Caleb Williams ultimately going to be. And as of right, our early answers were, this is fine. And then, and you heard this in the broadcast if you're watching it, D'Amico Ryans was blitzing the heck out of Caleb, which he normally doesn't do. They don't really send the blitz all that often. And at one point, Caleb was, I think, 11 for 12 when he wasn't blitzed, but he was, like 1 for 6 when he was. Like, that was sometime like the second or third quarter. and then that wasn't tenable. This isn't tenable. You can't do that. And there was a time in the fourth quarter where the Texans only sent 5. The Bears couldn't handle that pressure, and that's ultimately right when Caleb actually got called for that intentional grounding because he was just had to get rid of the ball so quickly. So, this I don't know how you fix this at this point. I don't know that you actually can. There's not a secret player hidden on this Bears roster unless Ron Amagaji can come in and play left guard for you and Tevin goes to right guard, but then you still have this issue at center. And even Tevin had his issues today and last week. So I'm at a bit of a loss in terms of what you would actually do going forward. But at the end of the day, the Texans are a good team though, too.
No, the Texans are. Look, I said on my podcast last week that I thought the Bears were going to lose 27-17. So the Bears were actually closer than I thought it would be. But, sometimes when you say a score like 27-17, you expect it to look better than it did, and that's where I'm kind of am with this. And I just want to respond to something that Tyler Avon said there about good news. Caleb's not taking as many hits as Fields in 2021. He had 18 hits against him today, 7 sacks and 11 QB hits. 18. You cannot let your quarterback get hit 18 times. And this was not because he was holding on to the ball 7-8 seconds. He held on to the ball sometimes to try and escape pressure and make a throw. But it was ruthless pressure out there. The Bears weren't getting anything done on the offensive line. And like you said, Mason, what can you possibly do? Because they can't get the run game going. And these guys are supposed to be run blockers. Tevin's a run blocker. Coleman Shelton is a run blocker. These guys are supposed to be able to get the defensive line moving, and they have not been able to do that. DeAndre Swift has not looked good. He does not look like he has a lot of vision. He does not look great in between the tackles. There's a lot of issues there in the run game right now. And again, I have a hard time. Is it Swift? Is it the offensive line? We're going to have to look at the all 22 here and really see exactly what happened here this week, because right now, this offensive line, like you said, what can you do? Here's the thing with Karan Amagaji. He hasn't played.
Right.
Forget preseason, nothing. So to just expect him as a 3rd-round pick to come in and change positions and come in and do a better job than a veteran like Nate Davis, that's a tall order. But Nate Davis had some awful whiffs out there. He looked lost multiple times. Coleman Shelton and Tevin Jenkins struggled. Even the tackles, who looked pretty good in week 1, the tackles struggled. Darnell Wright, couple penalties. He got whooped a couple times. Braxton Jones, I know, had a penalty. Also, I believe, allowed a sack. So there's a lot of problems on this offensive line. And you can have offensive lines lacking talent, and the sum can be greater, than the all the parts. But right now, the sum of this offensive line is less than the parts. They have more individual talent than they're showing out there. So maybe there's hope this can get better. But Chris Morgan, I'll be honest, I was a little surprised he got a full pass on last year's offensive debacle. He was one of the few guys that survived, and it is not looking like he should have at this point, Mason.
Yeah. It's a tough go about it right now. And you're absolutely right. Your options, and that's kind of what I was getting at, are not great. Karan, you mentioned all those things, but also the fact that he's from Yale. So even when he was playing in college, you're playing in some lower class of college play there. You're looking at Bill Murray, you're looking at Pryor as your other options on this team. So any changes that happen are going to have to happen within the walls of Hallis, and it's going to have to just be guys playing better. That's it. Simple as that. They couldn't handle simple stunts. Right. It was simple, just guys crossing
by those stunts.
Could not pick it up. Insane. On a more positive note, though, the Bears still have a good defense. The Bears were able to keep the Texans in check, a Texans team that is a AFC contender favorite, if not potentially a Super Bowl favorite. And early on, and I have problems with this defense. I have problems with the soft zone that they play, especially when you don't get a great pass rush. Yes, they got 3 sacks, but you need more ultimately if you're going to beat a CJ Stroud team. But they stepped it up and they made some really good plays and some important stops in this game.
Yeah, no, I think overall you got to be happy with the defense. Defensive line did have some moments. I was concerned about the defense early. CJ Stroud was moving them up and down the field. It felt like they were just going to keep scoring every time they had the ball. But to credit everybody, they really settled in the second half. I thought Tyreek Stevenson just had a really rough game, and he's still young, and that's going to happen. And Nico Collins is awesome. So that was a rough go for Tyreek there. But other than that, I thought a lot of people played well. Tremaine Edmonds, I thought, had a good game. I am the number one Tremaine Edmonds critic, and I will give him credit. I think he's played pretty well here 2 games in a row. And I think overall, we can sit here and look at this defense and go 19 points to, like you said, a very good Houston Texans offense with a lot of weapons and an excellent quarterback. You have to feel good about this defense. There's a lot of other things to be concerned about. But hopefully here, we knew this Texans game was going to be tough. These next few games coming up for the Bears look like winnable games based on how these teams are playing. So even while the offense continues to struggle, if the defense continues to play this well, they can get some wins going here the first couple months of the season. And hopefully the offense, which has, 6-7 new pieces, a new offense, a new play caller, a rookie quarterback, a lot of things that have to mesh. Hopefully they figure that out by about November 1st and really start humming on offense, and the defense can have them with a winning record as they get to the second half of the season.
And you're still seeing some weird stuff happening across the NFL right now, especially with offenses. You saw the Dolphins, yes, Tua had his concussion, but even before that, their offense was not doing well, and that is an explosive, good offense. The 49ers put up only 17 points against the Vikings, and Flores is insane, mastermind genius with what he does on defense. He just says, fuck it, I'm doing whatever I want. But at the same time, you still expected the 49ers to do more against the Vikings. The Colts were worse than, at least I thought, only putting up 10 points. So point being, offense across the league right now is a little funky. So I don't think the Bears are, set apart differently from that. And still the fact that they were able to score as little as they did, that has to be factored in too. But at the same time, also the other way with the Texans. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to drop into some of our categories for this pod. And this episode, special shout out to Bosco's All Natural Dog and Cat Holistic Store. They carry the best of the best for your fur baby. Come spoil them with their grain-free, rawhide-free, and 100% grass-fed treats. They actually have something special going on right now. If you have a super cute pet and they want them to be featured in their calendar, you can submit a photo via email to boscosinfo@gmail.com for a free entry. If you have a preferred month, make sure you dress your pet up in outfit that is specific to that month. For example, in October, make it a Halloween costume. The deadline to enter the contest is September 23rd at 3 p.m. That's Bosco Info, BOSCOS info @gmail.com. You have a cute pet, try it out. Why not? So first up, we have So As We Thought. This is where something that we expected to happen and something that we were a bit surprised by. What in this game went as expected for you?
I think what went as expected is the Bears' overall defensive performance. That's kind of exactly what I thought. I thought the Texans might score a little more than they did, but I thought the Bears basically had a good chess match with Bobby Slowick and CJ Stroud, only allowed 19 points, kept the offense in the game. So that's, to me, is the overall defensive performance. CJ Stroud did rack up 260 yards of offense, or I should say passing the ball. He did run for, -1 yards. He did have the first down that he lost on the one scramble, but overall that's what I would say is I felt that the Texans offense / the Bears defense kind of played out the way I expected it to. I just expected different things in other aspects of this game.
Yeah, I'll kind of piggyback off what you said, and with a little twist to it, where you can't not get pressure on Stroud and sit back in this soft zone that they tend to play and expect good things to happen. We saw that a little early on when they were getting diced up. A good example of that, there's that one Nico Collins one across the middle for their first touchdown that you weren't really getting pressure on Stroud. And then this is the way this defense is designed. Just keep everything in front of you, but you get one broken tackle and all of a sudden all hell will break loose. Now, I will say that Eberflus adjusted. The defense adjusted in that second half, and you saw a little bit of different pressures. It was coming from different spots, simulated pressures, things of that nature. So that I was happy with. It's just a little frustrating that it takes the second half to get going, but it's also early in the season. But yeah, I was not all too surprised by that. What was something you were surprised by in this game?
I'll be honest, with the Texans defensive tackles not being their strong suit and the pass rushers that they have coming from the outside, I thought the Bears were going to be able to establish more of a running game. That's really what I expected, because like we talked about earlier, Tevin Jenkins is a good run blocker. Coleman Shelton is a good run blocker. I think Braxton Jones is a solid run blocker. Like, you have these pieces here. So you should be able to get DeAndre Swift, and if Khalil Herbert's coming in, you should be able to get that ball moving forward 3, 4, 5, 6 yards at a time and establish a running game. Their running game was absolutely terrible. They carried the ball. The running backs, forget the Caleb Williams scrambles. That was the only time they actually moved the ball on the ground. They had 17 carries for 27 yards. And their last carry, I believe, was the Travis Homer 6-yard run. So before that, they were at, 16 for 21, basically averaging less than 1.5 yards a carry. I thought they were going to be able to get the running game moving better today. I didn't think it was going to be 175 yards on the ground. I did think they'd get 100 yards on the ground. They couldn't sniff it. Their running game is non-existent. And if you don't have a running game, you are going to get your rookie quarterback killed because they're just going to be able to sit in pass coverages because they're not going to worry about the run threat. So that needs to improve. I thought it was going to improve today. It did not. I think it regressed, and that is a major problem.
Yeah, I mean, they had 71 total yards, but 44 of that, like you said, was Caleb. DeAndre Swift at 18, Travis Homer with 6, Khalil Herbert with 3. This is DeAndre Swift's backfield. He had 14 carries. The other running backs, Homer had 1 and Herbert had 2. At some point, this distribution is going to have to change. I mean, Swift is not the just give him more and more and he'll get stronger as the game goes on. That's not his game. So I also thought it'd be not just thought that they'd be better, but they might do a little bit more of a hot hands coming into the season. And so far, it has been DeAndre Swift or bust. And that has not worked out along with the offensive line woes. Mine was that I thought that I'm blown away that no flag was thrown when Al Shahir threw a punch at Roschon Johnson, who was not involved at all in the play at all, just standing there, and that was missed. I know there was a big scuffle. There's a lot going on the sideline, but I mean that's a big play. That could change. That's momentum. That's a player that he should be ejected in the game for throwing a punch, and all of a sudden the complexion, of that defense changes. Now I'm not saying that they win, the Bears win the game if that gets thrown. But between that and, to be honest, the tackle by TJ Edwards on Joe Mixon, that sent him to the locker room. I believe that's a eversion sprain, deltoid ligament. That's why he was able to come in, because it's a pretty hardy ligament and can usually take that. The fact that that's not a hip drop, I mean, I don't know what is a hip drop. It hits like all 4 major points that they're trying to push to call that a play. No offense, TJ Edwards should have been called for that.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with that. There were a few. I mean, look, let's be honest. Tyreek Stevenson on the early play there, where the Texans got the unsportsmanlike conduct penalty. That was Tyreek Stevenson instigating that. I actually think on some of these calls, the Bears actually got the benefit of the doubt on some of this. Yeah, that punch, he should have been tossed out of the game. It's amazing that you can't replay that, for officials. It's amazing that New York, it was clear as day. It was a punch. I don't know why New York can't make those calls back, because there were a lot of players around the sideline. So I'm not shocked the referee missed that. And they're looking at a lot of other things, but I am surprised that, maybe that's going to change down the line and allow New York to come in and look at punches like that and say, yeah, he needs to be ejected.
Yeah. There's too many eyes in the sky and cameras to not have a bit more, controllability from New York, as one could say. This next section is going to be a good day. This is where we talk about something positive. I might need to change this to tomorrow is going to be a good day, because today is just not with a game like this. But what was something positive you took from this game?
All right. Now, I know he threw 2 interceptions. I know the numbers don't look significantly better. It's not like 174 passing yards is going to wow anybody. But the fact is that Caleb Williams had about 220 total yards of offense. That's more than double of what he manufactured against the Titans. And I mentioned it earlier. I thought he looked sharp, especially through the first 2.5 quarters before that pressure really started mounting from the Texans and the Bears offensive line really started crumbling. I thought he was executing the offense really well. And that's kind of what I was saying off of week 1, is it looked like he knew where the ball needed to go and what he needed to do with it. And it just wasn't coming together. I thought it was coming together a lot better today. So when we talk about, yes, we want the Bears to win 9, 10, 11 games this year and hopefully push for the playoffs, and that's what we want to see, it still isn't as important as have the Bears finally actually figured out the quarterback position. And it is. I know we talked about it because we talked about it with Mitch Trubisky. We talked about it with Justin Fields. It seems like every year of the last decade, we've basically been like, well, the quarterback, we need to make sure by the end of the year, the quarterback position is solved. Well, we're still there. And I'm looking at Caleb Williams right now about what needs to be done for a quarterback to execute an offense at the NFL level. And I'm seeing it from Caleb. And I really thought he took a lot of strides there. Now, and we can get into his deep ball, his intermediate ball, and how awful it was again. And that's a problem. And I don't quite understand what's happening there, but his accuracy, I do expect to get better as he gets more comfortable. But I was pleased, when we talk about Caleb, it's not going to be linear, but we need Caleb Williams to show improvement, week in and week out. He improved from week 1 to week 2. So I'm overall pleased with that. And that's, look, in a game like this where we can just tip our cap to the defense, and there wasn't one dominant performer who took over the game on defense, we're like, this is the guy. But on a day where the offense struggled and the offensive line was that bad, despite that, and I'll also give Caleb credit for this, his body language was good in the fourth quarter. He was getting abused.
Yeah.
Let's just say it. If Jay Cutler was back there, you would have seen the slouched shoulders, the head down. You would have seen him pissed off. I honestly think you would have seen it. You see it sometimes from Justin Fields at the end of those games when he was getting abused. Caleb didn't have that here. Now, again, if that happens week in and week out, the frustration is going to build. I'm sure of it. But right now, he looked the part. He operated the short game well, and he had good body language throughout the game, despite really an opportunity to really look frustrated in the fourth quarter, like DJ Moore did, for example.
Yeah, that was incredibly frustrating. I'm glad you brought that up because, yes, on that last throw where it was very, very visible to DJ that he was frustrated with that because he had beaten the defender there. He had a good position there, but like the previous play to that, DJ, it wasn't the easiest catch in the world, but it did drop it off your fingertips. And Caleb put that on a dime for you too. So
yes, he did.
It goes both ways. But really quick before I do mine, Tyler Avin asked, I think, an interesting question. Did the short routes just not exist when the blitz came, or was Caleb not seeing them? At the end of the day, we're gonna have to look at the all-22 on that. Broadcast view, it's kind of hard to tell at times, but I know there's a couple instances where I didn't necessarily think that they had the built-in easy button on some of those plays. And I think that goes to the whole question with Shane Waldron of where's your outlet and what does that look like? But I don't know about you, but I think I have to wait and necessarily see, again, that all-22 before I can make a grand declaration. But I do wish there's a couple more easy buttons integrated into this offense.
Yeah, and that may be something that they need to work on. I mean, we did see a couple slants there with DJ and a couple things, what we didn't really see with Fields and a Getsy offense. So you do like to see that. And I do think kind of the idea of some of those safety passes are supposed to be like Swift leaking out into the flat, and that the Texans had short stuff covered really well a lot of times when plays started breaking down. So I also think you have to give D'Amico Ryans credit there. But, look, we're going to see moving forward here. The Rams have allowed some points. The Colts have allowed some points here. There's teams coming up here that it's not exactly, 85 Bears defense level. So I think there's going to be some opportunities, hopefully, for this offense to look better. And if it doesn't, Mason, and we don't see things like better, and more intelligent, pass game, short yardage, plays, Shane Waldron calling up plays like you have with easy zone beaters and things like that, then we're going to be able to question this more. But again, it's only 2 games. Like I said, there is a lot here. I think of the 12 main pieces on offense, starters, so to speak, 7 are new. There's a lot of things that need to mesh here, and it hasn't yet. That's for sure.
Really quick, mine to be a good day. I was going to honestly say Caleb in terms of his mentality and what he did. You look around the NFL, let's just say with rookies, just if we're only looking at rookies here, Jane Daniels got a win today, but it was mainly throwing the ball within like 5 yards of the line of scrimmage. I don't need that. That's not sustainable long-term. You look at Bo Nix, he got beat the heck up today. You look at and Will Levis is in his second year and he still can't figure out what a bad pass is, and he keeps giving the ball away.
Did you see the clip? I hate to interrupt you. Did you see the clip today of Callahan coming up to Levis after he threw that?
Yes.
What the? are you doing? Like, it was like he was pissed, and it's not getting better with Will Levis.
Just it's stupid stuff that you see out of some quarterbacks. I don't think that's what you saw with Caleb. His eyes are in the right place, and even the 2 interceptions, right? He had the one jump ball to DJ Moore, where could that ball have been, I think, a little more ahead because he had a step? Yes, but at the same time, if you really watch that replay, DJ had hands on that ball. Your wide receiver 1 goes up and gets that, and then even your other interception that you had, that one was.
That was he broke away from Hunter, had his jersey ripped, and then he needed to loft it about 3 more yards to Cole, and he just underthrew it.
And he just underthrew it. So it's there. It's all right there, but he has to figure out the speed of the NFL. He has to figure out what he can and can't get away with. And I'm personally happy that this is happening now against a good team where he is figuring out where his spectrum is, right? This is what I can do, and this is what I can't do. And now, like you said, there's going to be some much more winnable games coming up against some lesser competition. You dial that in, and then hopefully when November 11th hits and you're hitting that divisional stretch that you have, you're winning because of Caleb, not just with him. Concussed corner. This is something in the game. Wow, there's a lot of things here.
I had this one ready.
That was so odd. That decision maker must have been concussed. Why don't you just roll into it?
All right. Well, Matt Eberflus had multiple opportunities for me for this, but the contested, I shouldn't even call it contested, the sideline catch that was literally in front of Matt Eberflus. He is standing right there. The play is coming right at him, and they challenge a play where not only are both feet in bounds, but both feet are in bounds by about 3 or 4 yards.
Yeah.
It wasn't close. There was almost a 3rd foot in bounds, and they challenged that. I could go further and say the other challenge on the Kyler Gordon interception was dumb because your guys upstairs are watching television and we all saw the ball hit the ground. It was a great effort by Kyler Gordon, but he didn't make it. They challenged that one. They took a random timeout in the second half. I don't even understand why they did it. And they only had 1 timeout left in the end of the game here, where if you gave Caleb Williams a little more time because you had more timeouts, or just the way he could have brought the ball down the field, maybe things would have been a little different. So Matt Eberflus, to me, Mason, again has proven that he is a good defensive coordinator, that he is a good head coach Monday to Saturday, but he is not ready to be a head coach on Sundays. And that is a big problem because he is, and this isn't going out on a limb, Matt LaFleur is winning games with Malik Willis. Dan Campbell has gotten his team to the NFC Championship game, and Kevin O'Connell's doing magic with Sam Darnold. Matt Eberflus is the worst coach in the NFC North. Whether you think he's okay or not, he is the worst coach in the NFC North. And that means the Bears are going to always have to outperform their opponents because they won't be able to outcoach them.
That's a really good point. I'm glad you said that because even if you want to take LaFleur and Kevin O'Connell and put them off to the side because of the offensive guru mindset, you have a guy in Dan Campbell who is not that. He's the CEO. He's exactly in theory what Eberflus was supposed to be. And Dan Campbell's the guy who, he goes for these gutty 4th down calls. He, for the most part, manages the game pretty damn well. And you see that game in and game out. Like now, today, the Lions botched the end of the first half because of something that was going on there. But for the most part, he's been very consistent. And if you cannot be better than him, like you said, and at least be the best CEO who isn't a offensive guy, that is a big problem. My concussed corner, I'll go with the Bears didn't have Montez Sweat, DeMarcus Walker, or Gervon Dexter on the field for the first touchdown by the Texans. You need a rotation. Guys need to get a blow every once in a while. But having 3 of your starters out at the time when it's a 2nd and 27 where it's the time where you buckle down and you're right. This is all about the possession battles and it's getting close to, the red zone. That's not how you do it. You can't have all 3 of them out. So whether that's an Eberflus decision or whether it's a Washington decision, right, as the true defensive coordinator, or it's the defensive line coaches, I don't care whose it is. You got to be like, hey, look, Montez, I need you to be out there one more snap while we give, Walker and Dexter a break here, or some combination of that. You just cannot do that.
No, it really shouldn't be that hard to get defensive line rotations that work and make sense. And yes, None of these guys are going to play 100% of the snaps. That's the way defensive line works in general. But when you have your top players not out on the field together, like why are you rotating those guys all out at the same time? It doesn't make any sense. If they're all going to play 75% of the snaps, then yeah, they don't necessarily, I know it's not exactly 70. I'm just saying, then yeah, they're, Billings will be 50%, but they're not all going to be out there at the same time. Then they're rarely all four are going to be out there on the same time, except for big plays. And that's where you need to just keep rotating these guys out and keeping them fresh and having them out for a couple games, a couple plays at a time. But you can't go out there and have those guys missing and have guys like, Williams and Booker and whoever's out there. Those guys aren't ready for big time plays. When you're out there, when the Texans are threatening and in field position, they were just in a goal to go situation. You just need to have better personnel groupings. You just have to.
Moving on to we here for moral support. This is an area that we want to work on going forward. I think the easy one you could do is offensive line. But so I'm just going to go with there's something wrong at the core of this team. The Bears had a drive in the second quarter that was fairly promising. Then you have a timeout before a delay of game. You have a false start coming out of that timeout. You get a sack on third down, and that ultimately leads to a punt. That doesn't happen to good teams, right? You might have one of those things happen. You have a funky timeout here and there. You get a sack here and there. But to have that many things stacked when you should have an advantage, right? Calling the timeout and coming out of that and getting that false start, et cetera, et cetera. The commonality when you trace it goes back to coaching, right? On third and short, where the Bears driving in the third, the play was designed where Waldron had come all the way across the line after the snap to block a Pro Bowl defensive end on a pass play on the QB's blind side. This all to me comes back down to coaching and what's happening at the core of this team. So that coach's room everywhere from Matt Eberflus through Waldron, through Washington as defensive coordinator, and all the way to the position coaches, there is something off here where these little things are getting missed and it's bothering me.
Yeah, and that is a really good one. I would just kind of, label it all for offensive execution because as we know, for the most part, and this was a big problem with Matt Nagy's offense, and I don't want to go back to Matt Nagy's offense where you'd look at the all-22 and like 9 of the 11 guys would do their job and 2 guys would get blown up and the play would go nowhere. That happened all the time in Matt Nagy's offense, and that's where we are right now with this Shane Waldron offense. Is it coaching? Like you said, are the guys not certain what they're supposed to be doing? Is it just they're not executing for some reason? It's there. They know what they're supposed to do, but they're not hitting it. Like the Cole Kmet play where he came across the block. Was it Anderson or Hunter? It was Hunter.
No, it was
right?
Hunter.
Yeah. Okay. So he comes across the block, Hunter. And I agree. You don't want Cole Kmet going one-on-one with Danielle Hunter for, and trying to hold him for 4 seconds. But that was a screen. Cole Kmet needed to be there for a second and a half. He just needed to be in front of him, and he just ran right around him and went in and blew up the whole thing. So that kind of execution, like the last, in essence, play of the game, Caleb's throw to Rome Odunze. It was a horrible throw. Why? Either Caleb didn't know the route or Rome didn't know the route because clearly Caleb thought he was going to be coming back to the ball. And if he did, that Caleb was throwing that ball with anticipation, that Rome was about to come back towards the sideline, catch the ball, go out of bounds. Bears live to fight another day. We all would have been doing backflips if that had happened. So either Caleb didn't know the play or Rome didn't know the play. Look, they're both smart players. I'm going to assume at this point that Rome didn't know the route and ran the wrong route. I'm sure we'll find out here. I'm sure the press is, the media is going to be poking around in the locker room and trying to figure that one out. But it's execution, Mason. It is really, really a problem because like we said, we're seeing 1 or 2 guys just not doing their job, or the offensive line, all 5 sometimes, and it's just not making the plays work.
All right, one last break here, and then we're going to get near the end of the show. What's important? Stat. I mean, it's what it sounds like. It's a stat from the game that we felt was important. What do you have?
All right. So my stat is, and I brought it up at the beginning, and I know we're talking a ton on the offensive line, but to me, this stat is so alarming. And it's the fact that Caleb had 11 QB hits against him and 7 sacks. He was hit 18 times on, let's just see here, 37 plus the sacks. He was hit 18 times on 44 dropbacks. He was hit on basically almost 50% of his dropbacks. And a lot of those was him moving and avoiding hits altogether. And that could have been a lot more. So I know we've talked about the offensive line a lot, and I'm sure we're going to talk about the offensive line more before we wrap up this podcast. But you cannot have Caleb getting hit this much. I mean, they brought it up. The Bears have like basically the longest streak in the NFL of quarterbacks who can't play the whole season. And then you watch that game and go, well, that's exactly why. This offensive line, it has to do everything better, and we can continue to talk about it. But that was the stat to me. Like, I wanted to come up with things, there were some things on the defense. You saw Tremaine Edmonds getting double-digit tackles, Javon Dexter getting a sack. There were all these other numbers that you could have some fun with and have excited with. But unfortunately, when they lose this game and get Caleb killed like they did, that's the number that jumps off the page to me.
That's a really good one. There's a couple other ones I thought about doing, but ultimately I wanted to go in a slightly more positive direction with this one, just because I don't want to keep being sad.
That's what I wanted to do too. I just couldn't avoid it.
When you look at the sacks that were taken and the yards lost, what you will see is that, right, the Texans gave up 3 sacks for 25 yards, and the Bears had 7 sacks, like you said, Gross, for 40 yards. Now, when you break that down, right, that means the Texans lost about 8.33 yards per sack, while the Bears lost 5.71 yards per sack. One thing that I think that is continuing to show some growth from one week to the next from Caleb is even when he is taking that sack, either A, he's getting some escapability, and you saw this time he either got rid of the ball more often than not, or at least was moving forward so the sack wasn't quite as detrimental. And there's a couple times where he just said, screw it, I got to scramble and get 1 yard. I mean, even at the end of the game there on that third down when he scrambled and there was a hold, I believe, or whatever it was, and he got a yard. That was better than him losing 7, and now all of a sudden it's 4th and even longer. So I think even within 1 week, you're seeing some of that maturation of Caleb of understanding how much is the appropriate amount to take in terms of that loss and how can you make it negligible.
Yeah, growth in his pocket presence. Absolutely.
All right, our kombucha peak performance moment, a defining moment from the game. Kombucha is a premium performance-based kombucha crafted specifically for athletes and active individuals. This revitalizing beverage blends the traditional benefits of kombucha with nutritional enhancements to support energy, hydration, and recovery. Better athletic performance, increased nutrient absorption, improved wellness, and improved cognitive stamina. Use code BEARGUTCHECK, get 15% off kombucha. It's pretty awesome. Caleb's going to need some of this to help his body heal after all those hits. What was your defining moment from this game?
Unfortunately, the defining moment for the game was on the Texans side of the ball. And to me, it was the CJ Stroud touchdown pass to Nico Collins.
Yeah.
To me, that really put the Bears behind the 8 ball. The Texans came down. The defense manages to hold them to 3 points. The Bears come back and match the 3. Caleb's looking good. You're feeling pretty good. And then that play, especially after the 15-yard penalty, the unsportsmanlike conduct penalty, to knock them back, you're like, okay, 3 points, no problem, 6-3. Bears live to fight another day, and they come back immediately with that touchdown strike. Nico Collins was a problem all day long, and to me, that kind of set the momentum going in Houston's way and kind of set the pace of the game. And at that point, the Bears never tied. The Bears never got to more than, they did cut it to 3 points at one point, but they never could get fully back in the game. They were trailing after that. They were trailing the rest of the game. And, that was the thing. It would have been amazing if they could have pulled it off and win that one, 20-19, even though that would have been basically their first lead of the game. But that was it to me. It was a huge play from Stroud. It really just kind of, I think, put the Bears back on their heels and went, oh, this is going to be a tough one. And they never really recovered.
Yeah, it was tough because you're playing from behind so much. And if you're someone that hasn't played a sport in a while, the emotional investment it takes to continuously be behind and clawing your way back and over and never really getting that moment of breath of saying, okay, cool, now we are in the lead. Now we have some control in this situation. It's a lot to deal with. And the fact that you didn't see quit in this team at all, whether it was on the defensive side and definitely not from Caleb. And that leads to my kombucha peak performance moment was that run, that scramble that Caleb had when they were in the red zone right before they handed off to Khalil Herbert for that touchdown. Caleb just lowering his shoulder through
Yeah, he
Texans.
trucked a couple guys. Yep.
That was something that, whether it's for Caleb, some of the swag you get from it, or if you're on his team, the fact that you see your quarterback, who is, I mean, he's not Josh Allen, so he's like a smallish dude, lowering his shoulder like that and putting the team literally and figuratively on his back. And then that just continues throughout the game too, in an extent, with how much he was getting beat the hell up back there, but he stayed in there. The body language was good. That to me showed the mental toughness that Caleb has, and I think kept the team in that positive form and almost pulled off a win.
Yeah. No, I love that play. That was a lot of fun. And that was where you felt like maybe they could get that just whatever they needed to get over the top and maybe take the lead. And when you look at this game and compare it to the Titans game, what's the one difference here? And of course, CJ Stroud never turns the ball over. I get that, but they did not get a defensive or a special teams touchdown. Not that you can expect them to do that on a week in and week out basis, but if they had gotten one, and that was the difference, that they hung in there against the Titans and they eventually turned the momentum and took the lead in that game because of defense and special teams. And while the defense played well, special teams was okay, not nearly as good as they were in week one. But when that happens, the offense needed to be able to get that touchdown and get that momentum turned. They are just not there yet and not able to do that for the multitude of reasons, whether it's Waldron, the offensive line, DeAndre Swift, Caleb's deep ball accuracy. We can go on and on and on. We've talked about it all here on this podcast, but that's the thing. Right now, this team needs the defense and special teams to go above and beyond, and they didn't quite go above and beyond enough. And again, not fair to them. I understand that, but that's where this team is right now.
Getting close to wrapping up here. Our Masseter player of the game, aka MVP, the Masseter, muscle in your jaw, can close the teeth with a force up to 55 pounds on the incisors and 200 pounds on the molars. So I think it's pretty fair to say that the Masseter is the MVP of the body with how strong it is, pound for pound, size for size. Who did you have here in this category?
I'm going to give it to Tremaine Edmunds. And again, I am the number one Tremaine Edmunds as far as I can tell in the Bears universe. I didn't like the signing. I didn't like the amount. I thought last season he let plays come to him. He didn't play aggressive. I mean, when you're paying a guy $18 million a year, you need to attack. You can't let plays come to you, especially when you're a linebacker. You need to attack. I didn't think Edmunds was much of an attacker last year. This year, and again, the sharp tackle he made on, I think it was 3rd and 4, wrestling him down last week against the Titans was a big play that he managed to do. He had a couple big plays again today. He actually got in the backfield and got a good pop on CJ Stroud. That's not usually his strength. Had a sack, just really made a difference in this game. He had a couple where he came up on the line of scrimmage, whether it was, I don't remember if it was Mixon or another running back, but tackled him at the line of scrimmage for a 1-yard gain, no gain, even maybe a loss. He really played well. And I kind of think he was kind of the heartbeat of the defense today. And that's what he needs to be. Here's the thing. This game from Tremaine Edmunds is kind of what I need to see Tremaine Edmunds do every week. That's what the Bears are paying him to do. And maybe this season we're going to see a better version of him. I'd like to see this continuing, and I can stop shutting up about that contract if he does that. Tremaine Edmunds is my player of the game.
I'm really glad you said that. He actually is mine too, just because I called him out on Bare Bones earlier this week in our preview show. He had 4 tackles in total against the Titans. And I said to Danny and Kyrie when we were talking, I didn't feel him in the game. But exactly all the things you said. I mean, he had 11 total tackles. He had that sack, a QB hit, tackle for a loss. There was way more impact down to down, and you just felt him throughout the whole game. But I don't need to repeat all that. You just said it. If I had to give almost like a little kudos to someone else that did some little things today, I'm going to throw it to Jack Sanborn, just because he had that big sack when we needed it. I just wish there was more opportunity for him on this defense, just because he's Mr. Right Place, Right Time.
Yeah, no, I think Sanborn played really well. That tip early in the game, that was going to be a big play. I don't remember who it was that was open behind him, but it was a wide open receiver. Sanborn, yeah, really help that early on. Again, now the Texans still came down and got 3, but they could have gotten 7, with that kind of stuff. Those are the little plays you need to have. I'm a big fan of Sanborn. And again, that comes back to Tremaine Edmonds. I didn't think they needed to spend that money on Tremaine Edmonds because they had Jack Sanborn. At every opportunity he gets, he continues to prove that he is a starting caliber linebacker in this league. And, he's an undrafted free agent, which means he's only got a 3-year deal. I'm going to be curious how the Bears handle this. I know they can, you do the restricted free agency thing and everything, but I mean, what kind of tender, there's all these things that are going to come into this with Sanborn, and our team's going to be willing to give him a decent chunk of change when he has an opportunity to see what his value is at the NFL level. So yeah, I'm a big fan of Sanborn. I like what he does. And, so far through, I don't know exactly how many snaps he had. He had like 3 in week 1. He barely played. This team's going to sit in nickel most of the time, as they should. But if Edmonds and Edwards are healthy, you're just not going to see a lot of defensive opportunities for Sanborn. And that's unfortunate for him.
I'm going to spring a surprise category on you real quick, just because the tenor of this podcast. Appendectomy. The appendix is a pretty useless organ. You don't need it, but it can get inflamed, and you sometimes gotta get rid of it. Who is the appendix right now for you on this team?
Well, all right. If we're going to do the appendix, we have to look on the offense. You're not going to, singling out the appendix on the defense is just like, well, when we're going to take out a healthy appendix because it's not inflamed right now. It's not causing a danger to the defense. So I think you got to look at the offense, which means you got to look at the offensive line. And I think Coleman Shelton could be a good one for the appendectomy, but unfortunately, I don't like Doug Kramer. I don't think Doug Kramer is very good at all. And Ryan Bates is the only other guy who can snap the ball, and he's out for at least a month. So if Coleman Shelton is needing the appendectomy, we're going to have to figure out a way to live with an inflamed appendix and hope it doesn't burst. So I'm going to go with Nate Davis, because that's a move you can make. He's clearly in the doghouse with the Ryan Bates rotation last week. So I like Matt Pryor. I think Matt Pryor is a decent guard. He's not going to, suddenly knock your socks off and get a 4-year, $40 million deal next year from the Bears. But I think he's a good player. I'd like to see him out there. Let's bench Nate Davis. Let's put Matt Pryor out there at right guard and see if things get better. They may not, but let's see if they get better.
I think that's an interesting point, just because at the end of the day, I mean, if you can just get functional guard play, right? All the tenor, I use that word twice now, of this offense changed substantially. If it's just not a sleeky sieve, now all of a sudden you can actually do a little more, you can assess a little more. So I like that idea. At the end of the day, too, if you are going to be the CEO hits head coach, you got to make sure that your whole team represents that. And as of right now, Nate Davis isn't doing that. I was going to do the exact same thing. Mine was going to be just between Coleman Shelton and Nate Davis, but because you actually have some flexibility of putting someone who's going to be Nate Davis, just someone I do want to highlight. He's not an appendix. If anything, he's more of your kidney. You need him, but he's not doing enough. In today's game was Montez Sweat. If you look at he had nothing. He had one pass defended. That was it. I need more out of Montez. And you look at Detroit, Aiden Hutchinson's getting 5 sacks. Like, even when you're schemed against, even if you have a big circle on you saying, don't let this guy wreck the game, you still got to figure out a way to be impactful. He's definitely not appendix. Don't get me wrong. Don't come at me in the chat and the comments, but I'm saying, like, he's a kidney that's not operating at full extent right now.
All right. And I'll throw then the second kidney of this team is Darnell Wright, because you need Darnell Wright. And he was good in week 1. And this is the thing now. Darnell Wright's entering year 2. Basically, in year 1 with a rookie tackle, you basically cut them slack every time they screw up. As long as they're getting the job done most of the time, you're going to expect a lot of penalties. You're going to expect some whiffs. It's just going to come with a rookie tackle growing. Year 2, we need to see big growth from him if he's going to become that block of granite right tackle for the next 10 years. So when I look at that, Darnell Wright with 2 penalties, Darnell Wright got smoked a couple times. That got Caleb, sacked. Darnell Wright needs to play better. You can't just be a bum slayer.
Yep.
And that's like Mitch Trubisky was a hell of a bum slayer. You put a bad defense against him, he's throwing for 280 and 2 touchdowns. But anything from an average defense to better, Mitch couldn't do anything. you can't just be a bum slayer. Darnell Wright's already a bum slayer. He needs, and again, last year, one-armed, Max Crosby. I'm not saying he can't do it. He didn't do it tonight, and we've got a rookie quarterback back there that needs a little more protection. When Nate Davis is a question mark and Coleman Shelton is a question mark, when you have the 9th overall pick or 10th overall pick, I guess, at right tackle, he's got to play better than he did. I don't care if it's Will Anderson and Daniel Hunter. He's got to play better than he did.
Certain positions need to be consistent, and your right tackle, your 10th pick right tackle has to be that. Let's wrap it up here. Our prognosis period, a brief look ahead. What does this mean for next week, and what are we looking forward to? What do we need to work on? Floor is yours, Mr. Zimmerman.
Well, I think in terms of what they need to work on, I mean, the defense, keep doing what you're doing. I don't see too much that needs to change there. Obviously, Tyreek Stevenson needs to play better, but that's fine. He had a bad game. It happens. That's going to be part of the ups and downs of a season. Defense continues to play well. Special teams overall continues to play well. Tip of the cap, again, no issues with the long snaps with Patrick Scales out. I was keeping an eye on that. All the field goal snaps were exactly where they needed to be. So good work there. I'm drawing a blank on our long snapper's name.
Daly?
Yes, thank you. But offensively, obviously, this offensive line needs to get better, and Caleb Williams needs to start making plays in the intermediate and deep game. Whatever the issue is there that's causing those accuracies issues, whether he's pressing, whether people are running the wrong routes, whatever it might be, will Keenan Allen help there and help settle him down when Keaton gets back? Sure. But yeah, I saw a tweet from Nate Tice when Chris Collinsworth said they needed Keenan Allen tonight. And he's like, no, it wasn't Keenan Allen they needed Larry Allen, because that was the issue. So, I think this offense needs to continue to try and find its identity. They need to find that identity on the offensive line, because if they do that, I think this offense is going to look better, because I think there's enough guys here that know what they're doing that can execute the offense if they have enough time to do it. But I know we mentioned it a while back here in terms of the prognosis moving forward. Another road game next week, but this is a beatable Colts team that's 0-2, still looking for their first win. They're going to be pressing. They're going to come out feisty, they do not want to fall to 0-3. This is a team with playoff aspirations. And then they've got a Rams team at home the following week, also 0-2. Then they go into the Panthers, who are without question the worst team in the NFL. They are not competitive. I know there's other 0-2 teams, but I think the Panthers are worse than they were last year. I don't even know how that's possible.
I don't know how, but yeah,
but they didn't get better. They got worse. And then that'll lead you into the London game against the Jaguars. So they've got 3 games here that are all very winnable, Mason. They can jump to 4-1. They certainly should be able to go 2-1 in these games and have a winning record going into that London game. And then I believe they have the bye after that. So be no worse than 3-3 going into the bye. This is the time here. The Bears, they did 1-1. I think everyone, if you said they're 1-1 through 2 weeks, no matter what the games looked like, every Bears fan would have signed up for 1-1, knowing they had the Texans on the road on Sunday Night Football. Now they've got an opportunity to really do something here. This is, the prognosis. Now it's time to step up. Now it's time to win some games and show the NFL that the Bears are a playoff contender.
You're absolutely right. I mean, I was going to highlight a lot of those same things, but the fact that you're going, to play the Colts, who are, I don't know what they are, but they're just not good right now. That doesn't mean they don't have the potential to be, but when you are giving up over 200 yards on the ground to the Packers and you're being beat by Malik Willis, where he didn't look like the Malik of old back with the Titans. He does look like he's a little more settled, but Matt LaFleur is just a dude. He's just awesome. But the fact that you gave up that many yards on the ground and in that way, I mean, they had 6 people who carried the ball. It was a very different kind of running game there. The fact that, Richardson, yes, he threw for over 200 yards, but he had 3 interceptions, and his interceptions and Caleb's interceptions, if you watch the game, very different. Richardson had some boneheaded interceptions that did not feel the same way that Caleb's did. So that Colts game is very winnable. The Rams game, they're just beat to hell. They definitely don't have Puka Nacua. They may not have
Cooper Kupp
now. Thank you. Just because he went out with an ankle today as well. That's a very, very winnable game as long as your defense can get after Stafford. You just have to, as you said, figure out how to make this offensive line passable. And I really like the idea that you just had. You go and you say, who is our most just consistent guard? who's the one that they won't get too high, they won't get too low. They're not going to give you, all of a sudden like Pro Bowl play. Who's going to show up, know the assignment, and be able to pick up a simple stunt? That is who needs to go in there at right guard at this point. Because right now, Nate Davis ain't in. And I don't want to necessarily single out Nate Davis because there's problems across that line. We talked about Wright having some problem today. Braxton Jones, I mean, he got punched in the chest a couple times and sent backwards.
Tevin didn't play great either.
Tevin did not play great.
That's 3 bad games in a row going back to the Packers game last year.
I don't know what is up with him right now. And we already talked about Coleman Shelton, but unfortunately, he is what it is because of the position and what you lack behind him. So,
well, let me throw this at you here as we're wrapping up. And I know you haven't gone back and looked at it, neither have I, but just gut reaction from watching the game. Which offensive lineman played the best today?
I'd probably say Braxton.
I think it was probably Braxton, and I don't think he played very well.
Yeah, it's kind of like, the best of the worst situation, but unfortunately there were two. We know the interior line was a mess, and then Wright let up too many big splash plays. There weren't like a ton of like bad ones, but there were too many splash.
And at least 2 penalties, yeah.
And that was an issue. But Bears fans, there are greener grass ahead. Keep in mind, again, who you just played. You played an AFC championship contender, if not a Super Bowl contending team, held them to 19 points, and the offense was a mess. So if you even get a little bit of offensive production, Caleb settles in more, figures out the speed of the game, you are looking at a team that can actually make some noise. And as Bill said, it's a favorable schedule. Last I'll throw out there, I'm not a big Trevor Lawrence guy. I think you can go in there and beat the Jaguars pretty easily because that whole team's a mess.
Yeah, I know. I don't think that's impossible. I'm just saying, at least the Jaguars have some pieces. These next three, they're 0-6. The next 3 opponents are combined 0-6 right now. So there's an opportunity. And like I said, we can't run the ball as the Bears cannot run the ball right now, and the Colts cannot stop the run right now. I mean, keep in mind it was Colts Texans in week 1, right? Yep. Joe Mixon running for 150 yards, and now this with the Packers. So that's a way to get healthy, is just play someone who's worse at something than you are.
A super movable force and a super animate object all coming together, and seeing who's going to come out on top here. All right, that's all we got. Thanks for sticking with us here for this little talk we had post-game. Again, greener grass ahead. Any last thoughts here before we get out of here, Bill?
I'm still in the don't panic mode. I know everyone wants to, fire Shane Waldron into the sun right now. I'm not there. I think there are some good concepts there. Like I'm already seeing people asking for Luke Getsy to come back after Gardner Minshew threw for like 300 yards. So like let's settle down. It's like I said, it's 2 weeks. It's a lot of new pieces, a lot of things that need to mesh together. They're 1-1. The defense is playing exactly as we hope the defense could play. As long as that continues, the Bears are going to win some games while this offense figures it out. So let's, is Shane Waldron a fraud? It's always possible, but based on what I saw the Seahawks offense do the last few years versus what this Bears offense has done, I do feel there are brighter days for this offense moving forward. I do think Caleb Williams is going to figure out his intermediate and deep ball. I'm not sure what's going on there, but I think this offense, again, it improved already. It was better in week 2 than it was in week 1. It went from absolutely atrocious to somehow only bad. Maybe we can be okay against the Colts and pretty good against the Rams and just keep moving in that direction and be great against the Panthers because everyone's great against the Panthers. So I'm not panicking. That's where I am, saying this team is 1-1. The defense is good. The offense is struggling, and hopefully the offense will improve.
Y'all should be following Bill at Bill T. Zimmerman. You should be listening to his weekly episodes here on Second City Gridiron, Bear Banter. It's awesome. I mean, the Rolodex you have and the people you pull in, it's amazing to listen to. I wish I had, a sixth of the people in my back pocket that you do. It's awesome stuff.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And that is just, 25 years of sports media business, or sports media career, being able to come through here for the podcast. So yeah, we'll have a new episode out most likely first thing Wednesday morning before you wake up. And, you'll have to wait and see who this week's guest is.
All right. We're waiting and hoping that what it's going to be. All right, everyone. Have a good night. Bear down.
Bear down.